all these stories that you guys are bringing up are great examples of how people around us are being affected by burnout. And I think it would be really useful to talk about what some of those signs are so that we have a better understanding of being able to notice it in ourselves, when we're going down that path, and also in other people. So one of the things that we can use as a sign for recognizing burnout is when we start obviously feeling exhausted or when we start procrastinating. Procrastination actually is a really good precursor to recognizing or to being in a state of this unmotivation, right? I'm not feeling motivated enough to do what I need to do. I'm instead procrastinating, doing something else. Feeling exhausted all the time or starting to feel exhausted when you think about the things you have to do, that's another accurate sign for recognizing when you're going down that path of burnout or lack of motivation. Can you guys think of any others that might be useful for spotting approaching burnout?
Yeah, I think one of them is really being in tune with some of your feelings. So when you're unmotivated, so you might be going through a long period of lack of motivation, and where you're just really overwhelmed and you don't know where to start with all of your work, or maybe there's too much work to do. And it's kind of like, yeah, everything seems really important and urgent to do, but you're just completely lost. Like, where do I even begin? Where do I even start? And then, as time continues, it starts turning into you start feeling helpless and hopeless because there's just so much to do.
And it just gets worse, doesn't it?
Yeah, it's like a cycle.
Snowball, you're right.
Like you also feel like kind of like a sense of failure and some self-doubt for not really being able to accomplish anything. You might feel like kind of alone and detached from the world.
Yeah, kind of that, why am I the only one who's having a problem? It's just me. Everybody else is doing the work, or everybody else is eating or doing fine. It's just me that's having this problem. What's wrong with me?
Mm-hmm.
Anything else in there, Ruhi?
I can't think of anything else.
Do you want to touch a little bit on some of the negative or uncomfortable feelings around the, like we've seen people get sad and feel overwhelmed and cry, but sometimes we see the opposite reaction where they're like angry and antagonistic and, they pick fights and that kind of thing. Have you ever seen that in somebody?
Yeah.
When they're feeling overwhelmed, right? You try to help them and they snap at you and, fangs out and claws out and everything. Yeah. What does that look like in people around you?
They're kind of just like annoyed at everyone. Like, why do I have to do this work? Like, I don't know. They're just like kind of frustrated that they have so much to do and they don't want to do it.
All right. So why don't we shift a little bit to talking about, the goal of this podcast in part is about not just identifying when we're heading towards burnout, but also what to do about it. And I think it's important, in order to figure out what to do, to figure out what is the underlying cause around the burnout, right? Because your response is going to be different depending on what's causing the burnout. Burnout doesn't just come from lots of work to do, because it also depends on how we're handling our work and what our perspectives are and things like that, right? So what can we say about some of the causes that underlie burnout and overworking?
I think one of them is like having these really normalized, crazy and very heavy work schedules and habits. I think a lot of mentality is that if I do a lot of work and if I'm constantly surrounded by all of this intense schedule, that I'm doing better. And I think
more is better.
Yeah, better as in I'm doing more, and so then to other people that might appear better, but really it's just like a really crazy work schedule that can lead to a lot of burnout.
Yeah, I feel like burnout is like kind of almost praised. Like, I don't know, people seem to want to almost achieve burnout because it's kind of like this accomplishment, like, oh, I worked so hard that I got burnt out.
Isn't that crazy?
Yeah.
Let me ask you this question. Do you notice that in adults? What behaviors are adults demonstrating that kind of cause teens to say, oh, I should be doing that too? Have you noticed that?
Yeah.
Do parents, or do you see societally, in shows or on the news, or I don't know where, what behaviors do you see? What do people say, or what attitudes do they have that feed into that idea that we just have to work hard and not necessarily smart?
I think like even like with my parents, it's like a mentality that you really have to be working almost constantly to kind of like be successful or to do something well. So even with my parents, like I see them working on like their work even outside of their work hours and at home and on the weekends. And I think a lot of times like the idea of taking a break is only if you have time for it or as like the last idea on um, of like your to-do list.
Yeah, it's the same for me. Like I remember once my dad was like bragging about not taking a day off of work for 2 years, and I was like, that's not good.
Oh no. Yeah, okay, let's not follow that role model. No offense to your dad. No offense to your dad. I'm sure he's fantastic. And that's not necessarily the healthiest role model. Yeah, the idea that more is better, just working even more, it's really a recipe for disaster. I mean, in other things, do we say, for example, for conditioning, athletes that are like Olympic caliber, professional caliber, they don't just work out excessively all day, all night, all weekend, constantly. They have rest time, right? They have downtime. They manage their rest a lot. I think I read somewhere LeBron James sleeps like 12 hours a day. Can you imagine sleeping 12 hours a day? Yeah. But that's what he does to keep in physical peak performance. Right?
Yeah, I think a lot of times, like the idea of resting and allowing your brain to take in that information is really underestimated. Like an example is like very similar to what T said, but when you go to the gym and you want to build muscle, something really important is having rest days that allow you to actually build the muscle. Even with things like sleep, having full hours of sleep is important for building memory and actually improving your success.
Right. You're much more effective and efficient at retaining the things that you're trying to learn and at creating new ideas, even like being creative and coming up with things, if you're rested. If you're just working hard and you haven't had enough rest and downtime, this is like blank brain time, basically, not having a screen constantly on that's putting information, even if it's not like critical information, or not studying calculus all the time. But if we constantly got information coming into our brain never has that downtime to just go, oh, let's restructure the cells so that we can connect here and connect there and think about something in the background while I'm washing the dishes, or whatever kind of rote activity doesn't require a lot of thought process because it's very automatic. That downtime for our brain allows us to do that extra work, right? Other causes around burnout and overworking, besides, I mean, that was a really important one, normalizing. We've made this crazy work schedule thing a badge of honor.
Yeah. I think that's the biggest problem, is that this idea that success is automatically connected to how much work you put in, how much like free time you have, or lack of free time you have. And really it's not true that like having more time for sleep and rest is actually going to help you improve your performance.
Yeah, I agree with Nicole. It's the whole normalization, badge of honor. We just get praised for being burnt out. That's kind of what normalizes it, because we're always like seeking approval from people, and burnout is like the way we get that approval.
Do you think that teens these days are in touch with their bodies enough to know when they're heading towards fatigue and exhaustion? Or do you think we've learned how to just kind of put the blinders on, or put the blinders on and just focus on the work and not think about, oh, I'm actually tired, or my neck hurts, or I have a headache, or I'm feeling thirsty, I'm just going to keep working, get to it later? What do you think about how in touch we are with our physical bodies.
I do see like a lot of people on Monolith Store complain about how they're tired or like their head hurts or something, but like even if they're aware of it, I guess they don't see it as that big of a problem in comparison to like their schoolwork.
Yeah. Even a lot of my
Yeah.
friends, say really similar things. Like they feel really tired or like they feel really sleepy or exhausted, but like it's almost like we've been trained to kind of ignore it and like take it as, oh, that's a good thing that we're actually doing work.
Yeah, let's do more of that exhaustion stuff so that'll help us better to get our work done. Crazy. Yeah, so that just do it mentality, just keep doing it, I guess, is what it's more like. It's not just do it, it's just keep doing it. Keep on, that kind of mentality. I think the mindset is kind of, it doesn't serve us well unless it's balanced with some awareness of our physical experience. Anybody want to talk about the judgment thing, the afraid to ask for help or rely on other people, like that comparison with other people?
Yeah, I can do that. So, okay. And I think another thing that is like a really big cause for burnout is like being afraid to ask help or rely on others. Like for me personally, like the way I grew up and like even the way like my sister talked to me was that you should always try to do it yourself, and that if you do it yourself, then that's really the best way to do it. And I think like for some things it's always important to try to be independent, but asking for help is definitely like a really good resource and like and a completely fine alternative to help you prevent burnout and overworking.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And there's a nuance around asking for help, right? So sometimes we think ask for help is, Ruhi, how do I do this thing, right? How do I do blah, blah? That's not quite what we mean when we say, let's ask for help. Sometimes it's more like, you know, hey, Ruhi, I have to do this, 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 and this. Would it be possible for you to take on one of those and help me out, right? So maybe, you know, you're going through midterms and your sibling isn't, and you ask your sibling if they can take on some chores right now during this week, and then you'll do their chores next week, right? Double up next week when you have a downtime, right? So the idea of asking for help is not just dumping your stuff on somebody else. It's negotiating like an adult some kind of balance so that during this time period, you might get some help from other people, and then during another time period, you give help, right? It's that reciprocal arrangement. That's one of the things around asking for help. Another thing around asking for help is that, well, this is something that employers look for. There's nothing wrong with an employee coming to a manager and saying, I need help with blah, blah, fill in the blank, right? But if you're coming to the manager asking them to explain everything to you, like, what are the instructions for doing this task that you've given me that I'm supposed to have as my responsibility? That's not quite what an employer wants. An employer wants you to be able to kind of do some research and figure out, okay, what are some of the steps, and then come to them with decision-making questions. Like, so I've done some research on this. I know that these are the things that need to be done. I can manage these ones, but I'm struggling with these other ones. Can you help me out? Or can you put somebody else on these ones? Or can somebody else share this responsibility? We'll do it together. You know, like you come with solutions to your employer. Same thing with teacher. Being able to say to a teacher, right now I'm swamped with these other 2 classes, my AP exams or whatever, and your class is not the AP and it's kind of fallen down the ladder. I'm sorry. And is there a way to get a postponement on this particular thing or that thing, or you know, like look for some kind of negotiation or accommodation around it, not just throw your hands up, I can't do anything anymore, somebody else take it over. Does that make sense about the difference between asking for help and sort of asking for fine-tuned help?
Yeah.